Well, hey there, and welcome to another Ignite Press book launch livecast. As you can see, I have here today with me Jared Oates, and he is the author of Tension, Mastering the Superpower of Paradox-Aware Leadership. And we're going to have a great time talking about his book and about paradox-aware leadership. Well,
Thanks,
Jared,
Everett.
welcome. Welcome here. Where are you jumping in from? Where are you located now?
I'm in Linden, Utah, which is kind of nestled right at the base of a big mountain called Timpanogos. And,
All right, must
pretty
be
place to
must
be.
be beautiful and probably crisp this time of year.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I'm excited about your book, and for anyone watching the live cast, you can participate with us in the chat log, where you can put any comments or questions there, and I'll try to feed those to Jared as we go. Also, it's important for you to know that this book is on special right now on Amazon, where you can pick it up for the Kindle for 99 cents. The paperback is also available there, and you want to go out and get a copy of that now. So, Jared, why don't we do this? Let's start by just telling everybody a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, and kind of how that leads us into your book about paradox-aware leadership.
Sounds good. Yeah. So if I go back to college, I was an English major. And I liked that so well that I went back and I got another English degree. And then I realized, oh, I've got to earn a living. And so I had to find something else to do. And I became an engineer, software engineer, and I did that for about 15 years. It was a self-taught process and kind of a steep learning curve for an English major. But it was really rewarding because I was able to create new products, new things. And just in the spirit of the technology world that I lived in, it seemed the natural thing to become an entrepreneur. And so I have been a serial entrepreneur, and I've launched several different companies, and most of them have not worked out, and a few of them have. And so the most recent one was a training company. We had a learning platform. The name of the company was Niche Academy. I started it about 11 years ago with a good friend of mine, Jeremy Wilson. And the core of it was teaching people online. And we had worked together at a company that served libraries. And so that was kind of our natural audience. And so we built training for libraries, public libraries mostly. And then we branched out from there to academic libraries and nonprofits. But the heart of it, and the thing that was most fascinating to me, was how training leaders was probably the single most impactful thing you could do for an organization and for a company. And I've seen that leaders have an outsized influence on the success of an organization. And they have the ability to create an environment for everyone else that works there that either makes them miserable or happy. And so that the idea of training leaders really became a fascination for me. And so that's kind of led me to where I am today, to have a company that focuses on training leaders and publishing this book, which is about a rare and impactful skill for leaders.
Well, I love the fact that you're focusing on leaders, because obviously, if you can impact leaders, leaders impact others, and so that makes perfect sense. And your statement about getting a degree in English and then wanting to do something that provided for the family resonates with me,
Yeah.
as you can well imagine, since that was a path I took: English major, then into the business world, and then somehow into publishing.
Yeah.
So I totally get it. So as we talk about your book, you have this concept that you call paradox aware leadership. Why don't you tell us what that is?
That sounds good. Um, I'll maybe read a little bit from the book, a definition of it at
Absolutely.
some point. But in a nutshell, what I've realized is that when people get stuck in a situation that seems like there's no win, there's no good solution, it simply means that they're neglecting something important. And the reason that people usually neglect something important is because they're focused on something else that feels incompatible with the thing that they're neglecting. So that's the essence of paradox, is a tension between two things, two necessary things that feel like opposites. But as you explore it, you realize that they're interdependent. And so the interdependence of necessary things is at the heart of what paradox-aware leadership is. Leaders that understand paradox see possibilities, they see options that other leaders simply do not see, because they assume an either-or mindset. Another word for paradox awareness is both and thinking, or integrative thinking. And I've kind of stuck with paradox awareness because it suggests that there's a reality out there, and you just need to kind of become familiar with it to be able to harness it.
So interesting. Because I think of the word paradox, and yes, I think of two things that are completely incompatible. That it's this, but it's also this, and how in the world can that possibly be the case? And of course, some of those things that probably historically we've looked at as paradoxes were ultimately resolved. To find out that they weren't completely incompatible, and yet others remain. Can you give me an example of a paradox, that you've encountered, or that you've encountered with your clients, that like you said, it's both and? So
Yeah.
can you give me an example of both and?
Well, I come from the tech world, and one of the people that I've um, studied a lot about and admired a lot is Steve Jobs. And he was making computers at a time when there were a lot of people making computers and making software for computers. And because I've been in the nuts and bolts of that process, I understand that there are difficulties sometimes in managing a tension between design concerns, so things like the user experience and the look and feel, and engineering concerns, which are about functionality and getting features out there. And in most businesses that are in this space, they see that as a question of trade-offs. And you got to focus on one or the other. And you can't please everybody. You can't do both. And so most companies lean heavy into the engineering side of it. They want to get the features out. They want to get that functionality going. And if you look at the kinds of products that produced, the early days of Windows, these clunky square boxes, and you get computers that have these rough edges inside, and they're modular, so you can put them together. And there's a logic for why those trade-offs are the norm. Steve Jobs took a different approach. He refused to concede one or the other. He said he said that actually design is functionality and form is function. And so he created products where there was this continual iteration and continual dialogue between design and the user experience and the features. And that by holding that tension, he found ways to do things that no one else was finding. And if you think about the series of just category creating products that were the result of that paradox awareness, the iPad, the iPhone, the iMac, all of those things changed the way people experienced technology. He was paradox aware. Apple became, I think for the first time in 2011, the world's most valuable company. He eclipsed ExxonMobil, and it was actually right before he died, which was kind of an interesting thing. But that was the thing that made Apple different. It
Hmm.
was the marriage of these two paradoxical goods, these two necessary things that in reality were mutually dependent.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because I remember, he very famously, you know, declared some things just nope, unnecessary, not going to do it because either it was going to cloud their product stream or he didn't think it would have the user experience that they wanted. And of course, some of those, people have come back and they've come around. I remember, no, nobody, him saying nobody needs a 6-inch screen on their phone, and of course that was at a time when we all wanted our phones to be small,
Yeah.
and totally get it. And now, of course, a 5.5, 6-inch screen is pretty common, but um, that is interesting. And to think of the battles he must have fought as the leader in his organization
Yeah.
when others were probably pushing for, no, it's horsepower, it's the number of features we can do. And yet the crazy thing is they were able to create the iPhone was this crazy combination of features
Yeah.
with user experience, with function that were accessible. To this day, when my mother-in-law needs a phone, I'm recommending to her an iPhone because it's easier to use.
Yeah.
And even though, of course, Samsung and other companies have perhaps, caught up in some areas and maybe passed in areas, I'll still recommend that because it's the proper user experience for her.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, and
So,
just with that, it's worthwhile to note that he scrapped one of the earliest phone projects because they were working with the assumption that you needed a keyboard. How else were you going to type numbers and things? And he refused that kind of a trade-off, and he said, no, there's got to be a different way, and that's how the multi-touch screen came into being.
incredible, because I was one of those guys who was like, oh no, I have to have a keyboard.
Yeah.
You know, so that is interesting. Now, you called your book Tension.
Yeah.
How'd that come about?
Well, it almost wasn't. I had a conversation with someone who markets books for a living, who knows a lot more about it than I did, and I told him that was the title that I was contemplating, and he said, "That's a terrible title. That's going to turn everybody off."
Because who wants tension?
Yeah, right. And there are all kinds of ways you can misunderstand it. Are you talking about sexual tension? Or are you talking about bad
Okay, that's the one
relationships?
way I didn't think of it, but fair enough.
Sorry, I apologize. I had to
No, it's
put
it's
that
it's
in
okay.
there.
It's applicable as well.
But I stuck with it in the end because it creates an open question. What does that mean? And it's the simplest way that I can think of to express what it feels like to live in a paradox aware world and to operate from a paradox aware mindset. You don't try to resolve differences and settle a question. You realize that there is something productive and something worthwhile in the tension. That's how you grow, that's how you discover. And you have to keep that alive to be able to find the innovations and the breakthroughs. If it were easy, and if it were, there were obvious answers to some of these tensions, then everyone would do it. You wouldn't have some problems. But because the tension requires you to seek to look a little deeper, you in the end you create a solution that is durable, where if you choose to go to with one side or the other of a paradox, eventually the thing you're neglecting comes back to bite you. So I stuck with
Mhm.
tension.
Okay. It's interesting. Yeah, I love what you're saying, and it reminds me of just hiring choices.
Mm,
When I was early in my business and and embarrassingly far too late in my business, my tendency was to hire people who were like me.
yeah.
Right? It was the natural thing of, oh, they're like me. We'll get along great. We'll be super productive.
Yeah.
And
No
things will be
friction.
smooth sailing. Exactly. And trust me, my one of my main goals in life is no friction. Okay. So, uh, and and then I discovered that was wrong, right? That then that wasn't going to help my company if I just hired people that were like me. And so
Yeah.
you've worked with members of my team, and we're all very different,
Yeah.
and we see things differently, and gosh darn it, that creates tension. It absolutely
Yeah.
creates tension, and sometimes it makes things really uncomfortable, but it does make us better at what we do as a result. So now there was a question, speaking of, um, Malia asked this question: can you touch on your cover and how the main graphic relates to your title,
Yeah.
tension? So let me hold that up there.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
So we went through a design process and we had, I don't know, probably 800 different designs in the end, something, I mean, some enormous number. And what I was looking for was something that expressed what productive tension is like. And we looked at things like, a bow and arrow, or, the balance of rocks in a Japanese garden, or a kern or something like that. But the thing that kind of came back to me, and maybe it's because I like the guitar, is that when a string goes flat or gets off key, it's because that tension is off. And so just the way that the cover represents the a prerequisite to beautiful music, which is the tension that's applied in just the right amount to the string, to each of those strings. And I I feel like that's what we're looking for. And no one would think, okay, I need to. My guitar is it's been stressed long enough. I'm just going to loosen all the strings, and nobody does that, because everyone intuitively understands that if you want music, you need the tension.
It's the perfect analogy. I remember in your cover iterations, one of yours was a bow and arrow, and
Yeah,
that was my favorite. And because I felt like a bow embodied tension, but I'm glad you chose the guitar, because the guitar is honestly, it's the perfect analogy to what you're describing, because each string is tuned to a different note. And when a chord is struck, it's, in the case of a guitar, that's six different notes being played that together create a beautiful sound.
mm-hmm.
And that sounds like the analogy of six different employees, six different voices, six different opinions, that coming all together can create
Yeah.
something beautiful.
And in any individual life, there are a number of tensions in play. The difference, the tension between courage and caution, the tension between frankness and diplomacy. All of these principles work together to create something that is enduring. And paradox awareness is simply a way. What I've done with the book, and then with the leadership progress cycle, the company that I've created, I've tried to distill all of the complexity and all of the overwhelming um, detail in working through paradoxes to something that's simple, that's repeatable, that you can acquire as a habit, as a practice. And it's a little like riding a bike. I can teach you in an afternoon how to do paradox aware leadership, but then it's a process of a lifetime to
Mm.
learn to apply that skill in different settings at different speeds.
Well, I'm sure it's something I could use some instruction and practice at as well. Now, I want to go through a couple points in your book, and I know you've also probably have a section of your book you'd like to read. You you just threw out this word, just caution versus confidence,
Mm-hmm.
and other paradoxes in your book, strength and vulnerability. measurable versus qualitative goals.
Yeah.
I'm just going through, these are all different opposing factors, I suppose, maybe, or
Yeah.
opposing qualities: flexibility versus grit, um, co-creation versus directional clarity. That's interesting. You want to talk on that for a second?
Sure. I mean, that's something that I think leaders experience all the time. You have people that work for you that just want to be told what to do, and they'll be really good at implementing it. And you need people that are willing to take direction, and that's an essential function for a leader to get clear about what the priorities are and what you're really trying to accomplish. You set the vision as a leader. That's directional clarity. And yet, if you do not engage the minds and the hearts and the talents of the people on your team so that they feel ownership themselves and they feel like what you're building together is also their creation, you miss out on most of the energy. If you lean too hard to directional clarity, you have to supply all the energy to get the team up the hill. On the other hand, if you lean too far into co-creation, you never get direction and everybody kind of goes in different directions. And so the tension is between those two paradoxical necessaries. And as it plays out, you realize that they actually are dependent on each other. For the team to really feel ownership and to feel like they're contributing to something, you have to have a shared vision, not just a scattering of individual visions. And if you're going to actually get to the top of the hill and reach that vision, you need the energy and the creativity of everyone that's part of that team.
Oh. And you had a part of, do you have a part of your book that you wanted to read for us?
Yeah,
Jared?
absolutely. I thought one of the things that might be most useful is just my definition of paradox awareness, paradox-aware leadership. So here's what how I express it. You've been asked to cut costs and increase morale. Your team wants autonomy, but also clear direction. You feel pressure to move fast, but know that patience will lead to better outcomes. Sound familiar? These are paradoxes, and we would do well not to wish them away. Paradox-aware leadership isn't about choosing sides. It's about standing in the place between them with open eyes and a steady heart. It's leadership that dares to say both are true and neither can be ignored. A paradox is two essential truths, each valid, each pulling in different directions. And the tension between them is where the magic happens. Paradox-aware leaders don't seek to resolve these contradictions by eliminating one truth in favor of the other. Instead, they embrace and leverage this tension, creating balance, resilience, and innovation. Here's the idea in a nutshell. The tension itself isn't the problem. It's actually the key to the solution. Think of it like breathing. Is it better to inhale or exhale? You'd never ask that because the rhythm of both is what sustains life. Paradox-aware leadership works in the same way. Inhale decisiveness, exhale collaboration. Inhale urgency, exhale patience. It's this rhythm that gives teams oxygen. The goal isn't to eliminate tension, it's to metabolize it so your leadership becomes not just more balanced, but more deeply human. The tension isn't in your way, it is the way.
Wow. Wow. It is the way. That's pretty strong, powerful declaration. I like that. You're so when you sat down to write this book, who'd you write it for?
The immediate audience was the people who are responsible within an organization for training leaders, or for the coaches and consultants and executives that take that on. But it's really for anyone who wants to lead, even if they're only leading their own life more intentionally. So the business has a primary audience, but I hope it's written in a way that it resonates with people beyond just those trainers and coaches.
Well, I think that even just from that snippet you read now, it's pretty clear that it is. Now, Zelda asked this question. I'll pass it on to you. And that is, if a leader only takes away one core concept or idea from your book, what do you hope it is?
I would say you can do this. It's rare. It's a skill. I call it a superpower because it is uncommon, but also because it's so impactful, and it's something that anyone can learn.
Excellent. Now um, one of the key parts of your book, you talk about um, applying paradox awareness with the leadership progress cycle.
Yeah,
Can you speak to that? And we've got just a few minutes left, but I want to give them to you.
sure. The leadership progress cycle is just that repeatable, simple process for applying paradox-aware leadership. There's four steps, and they do work cyclically. You clarify what you're trying to accomplish. You clarify your goal, and then you clarify what the crux barrier is to that goal. What's the one thing that if you could solve, it would make everything else easier. And then you accept that the answer is not going to be obvious and it can't be known up front. So you experiment. That's the third step. You try different things and you make those experiments as inexpensive and as quick as possible. So you maximize learning and you minimize the cost. And then the last part is just to measure your results. Numbers keep you honest. And so as you apply that, as you measure your results, it refines your goals and the process starts again. And it's something that you can develop as a habit, as a skill, and it's transformative.
Well, I tell you, Jared, you have a lot of wisdom to share. And for someone who wishes to reach out to you directly, what's the best way for people to find you?
Visit my website.
Yeah.
It's the LPC, so the Leadership Progress Cycle, turned into an acronym, thelpc.com.
All right. I'm going to put that in the chat, and hopefully it'll go through. I always forget that. Anyway, let's just send that through. Well, fantastic. Jared, it's been a joy, and I want to remind people that Tension is available now on Amazon, where you can get it in paperback, but also the Kindle is on a current launch price of 99 cents. And that'll be true for the next day or two. If you're watching this on a recording and it's not 99 cents, well, it's still going to be a bargain, I promise you. And the wisdom, very, very valuable. So pick up a copy. And it also strikes me that this is a great gift. If you have other leaders in your life and want to be leaders, budding leaders, the next, our future leaders in your house, I think this also can be very, very valuable. It's funny. I had a friend of mine, Jared, who would pay his children when they were growing up. He would pay them $20 to read How to Win Friends and Influence People, and each year he would pay them $20 to read it again. And those kids have turned out amazing. They are fantastic kids, and this is one of those books. It's funny. It wouldn't. I'm not saying give it to your 12-year-old. But there might be some pretty forward-thinking 12-year-olds out there that could use it. I'm sure Steve Jobs would have been one of those, quite honestly.
Somehow he ingested it.
Yeah, I love it. Well, hey, Jared, thanks so much for coming. And for the rest of you in the audience, if you have a book that you're thinking of getting out to the world and you want to see the path forward on that, we're happy to help you. Just go to ignitepress.us. That is ignitepress.us. And I will let the bumper take us out. Take care.